Good morning. Good morning, Royal We Fellowship. So happy that you are joining with me this morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. Please join me in prayer. Our Father, who are in heaven, how holy is your name? And your kingdom will come, and we wait for your will to be done here on earth as it is in heaven. Lord, we ask that you give us this day and each day our daily bread, and forgive us of our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Lead us not into temptation, and deliver us from the evil. For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. And everybody says, Amen. All right. While people are joining in, let's go ahead and get started. We are going to cover uh, a lot this morning. Let me get my windows here organized. Here we go. Now, for those of you who joined with us last week, you'll know that we are talking about Abram as Abram was called out of his family of origin. He was called out of his his kinship, out of his father's house. This is something that we need to understand coming out of toxic relationships, that in order to move on, in order to become blessed in our own lives, we oftentimes need to leave everything behind. And this is a very difficult message for a lot of people who especially believe that the idea or concept of leaving family or leaving blood relatives or leaving behind your genealogy or your heritage or your culture. Leaving these things behind seems like such a radical thing to do, especially in today's culture. But I would uh, have you consider that it was always something that was hard to do. It is no more easier today or difficult today than it was even back then. For Abram to be called away from his hometown, his father's house, his culture, his community, in order to be blessed and become the father of many nations, kind of probably made no sense to anybody at that time as well. All right. So Genesis 13 is where we're picking up today. So for those of you who have a Bible, go ahead and open up to Genesis 13. That's where we are going to begin. Now we know that Genesis 13 verse 8, we talked about last week how Abraham said to Lot, "Please." Now let's back up real quick. Abraham did not do exactly what was instructed. He did not leave everything behind in his culture, in his lineage, in his kinship. As you know, Abraham brought along with him not only possessions, but he also brought along with him his nephew Lot. And this is an important thing to understand, because what essentially was taking on is that what Abraham was taking on was his failure to be able to release and let go of everything in order to receive God's full blessing and his calling on his life, coming out of one way of living into a new way of living. And this relates to you and I, because a lot of us have a very difficult time of letting go of past things in order to receive the fullness of what God might have for you and for me. And oftentimes, especially if we come from toxic backgrounds, toxic families, toxic cultures, whatever the case may be, it takes a full release of these things in order to move on. So Abram did not move on without everything. He left, yes, but he took Lot, his nephew. So Abram, we get to this point in Genesis 13, chapter 13, verse 8, where Abram says to Lot, after the contentions have been rising, after things have been going south, because once again, Lot is becomes this. Uh, uh, there's fighting going on. There's quarreling going on, right? So Abraham said to Lot, "Please let there be no contention between you and me, or between your herdsmen and my herdsmen. After all, we are brothers." Abram is trying to do the right thing to resolve the conflict. We can learn a lot about how Abram resolves the conflict. And the conflict that we're talking about is the scarcity fight. This is the typical narcissism fight. How many of you are aware that when you deal with toxic people and with narcissists, it's a battle of scarcity? Toxic individuals do not believe that there's enough love to go around for everybody. They do not believe there's enough of status to go around for everybody. How many of you coming out of toxic relationships realize that it seems like everything is a competition? This is exactly what was going on. And so Abraham told his nephew Lot, listen, there's no need to fight over this. There's not a scarcity issue. Abram knew in his heart that he had a promise. The promise was if he left, then Abram would be the father of many nations. That is all Abram set his eyes on. He let go of all the other ideas of who has what, who has more. None of that mattered to Abram, and we're going to be able to see that in today's message. Now then, so here we are. Abram was told to leave his father's house, leave his kinship. By the way, I looked up definition of kinship as well. It means blood relationship, sharing, or characteristics of origin. So when the Bible says that Abram was to leave his kinship, he was to leave his blood relationships. That included his nephew, but he did not. Now, this is what we should pay close attention to at this time. How Abram resolves this conflict, because this is how you and I should be dealing with toxic people in our lives. And it's going to be a twist. It's going to be unlike anything that you have previously thought in how you should deal with toxic relationships and narcissists. But Abram does the unthinkable. And this is why we should pay close attention to this. Abram gives Lot the choice of what he wants to do. Follow with me now, Genesis chapter 13. In verse 9, after Abram says to his nephew Lot, please let there be no contentions between you and me. Let's stop the fighting, basically is what he's saying. Let's stop this. Now, in 13 verse 9, Abram says, is not the whole land before you? He's showing Lot everything before him. He says, it's not the whole land before you. Now separate yourself from me. If you go to the left, I will go to the right. If you go to the right, I will go to the left. Abram does the unthinkable here. I want you to imagine what this looks like. When somebody is at odds against you, you are finding yourself in a contentious battle, and this is exactly where Abram was with his own nephew, Lot. This is the result of being involved in toxic relationships and not being able to let them go. There's that battle for scarcity. There's that battle for status. There's that battle for love. How many of you have experienced that with brothers, sisters, siblings, or even a spouse? So Abram does the unthinkable, saying, I give you the choice. Let's end the contentions. If you want to go that way, and I'll go the other way. If you want to go that way, what's going on here? It would seem that if you really want to end it so that you can find the blessings in your life, then you must allow them to believe that they are winning. Do you follow me on this? What Abram is doing is giving Lot, his nephew, the option to win. It's a win for Lot. And this is so radical. This is different. And as I read this and I dissected this, and I've made a video on this in the past on the Organic Royal We channel, Abram is allowing Lot to win, allowing Lot to have the choice in the matter. And this is something that you and I wouldn't typically consider, right? However, by allowing toxicity in our life, allowing the toxic people or the narcissist to win in their decision, or at least seem like they are winning, ultimately, how many of you know that you become the winner? By giving them what they want. And now, I don't mean giving them what they want in a way of serving them. I mean when it comes time to where the contentions are rising, when there's a lot of fighting and drama, and they're talking about leaving, and they're threatening. How many of you have dealt with toxic, abusive people who threaten to leave you, threaten to not include you, threaten this? How many of you have ever radically thought just to say, okay, that's fine. If you want to leave, go ahead and leave. Go wherever you want to go. You win. You choose. Now watch this. This is important to understand this. So it does in fact seem that Abram is allowing Lot to make the choice, to let him win in the situation, allowing Lot to have exactly what he wants to have in the situation. The narcissists, right? They want to discard you, move on, let them go, as we just said. Let them go. So what happens in this situation? Lot picks what looks to be the best option. Genesis 13, chapter 13, verse 10 says, Lot looked out, saw that the whole plain of the Jordan, all the way to Zoar, was well watered, like the garden of the Lord. I want you to imagine with me, you're looking out. Abram is with Lot. Now, mind you, Abram had the awakening. Just like you, just like I, we are awakened to something greater that God is calling us to, right? Abram had this awakening. He knew that God was calling him to this awakening. And so he had to put down what his eyes saw and instead go by what faith was leading. And so as they were both looking around, Lot was looking around all the way to Zoar, and it looked like it looked like a well-watered garden of the Lord, what Lot saw. The land looked perfect. As Lot looked, it was perfect. It was, imagine a desert over here, and then over here is this garden-looking place that Lot said, that's where I want to go. It looks the best, and that's what I want. And Abram was there. And Abram gave him the choice. Okay, if that's what you want, Lot, that looks like it's the best. You take that, and I will go the opposite way. So Lot did choose Genesis 13, 10, and now we're on to 11. So Lot chose the whole plain of the Jordan for himself and set out toward the east. And Abram and Lot parted company. So as Abram watched Lot leave with all of his possessions into what looked like the perfect garden of God, of the Lord. Now, mind you, this was before God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, but that's exactly where Lot was going. Now, this is important for you and I to understand. Looks can be deceiving. When we allow toxic relationships to go, when we allow narcissists to leave our lives, and they seemingly are moving on to better places than where we are, all we have in our life is a promise that we're hanging on to by the Lord, that our lives will become manageable, that our lives will become great, that we are capable. As we're watching a toxic person, someone who did not have that same promise perhaps, but we're watching them move on to what seems like something far better than we could imagine. It looks like they are walking towards the watered garden of God. It looks like they are receiving the blessings. How many of you have allowed narcissists, and it looks like they're getting the money, they're getting the bigger houses, they're getting the nicer things, they're going on the nicer trips, and you, on the other hand, are not. You have nothing more than a promise that you're hanging on to, but in real time, you're watching them move towards something that looks pretty darn special. This is our story. Abraham is sharing in our story. We are sharing in Abram's story. So Abram understood what that looked like. Is it confusing? Possibly. Was Abram confused? Not really, because he was still hanging on to the promise. Now, there's a lot to be said about Lot's choice in choosing the whole plain of the Jordan for himself. Ambrose of Milan, 397 AD, said this: howdiness is the companion. Howdiness is the companion of those who deviate from the truth. As Abram was humble in that he offered a choice, and Abram did humble himself to offer Lot a choice. So Lot was rather insolent in presuming to choose. Do you catch that? So oftentimes, when we offer somebody a choice, if we offer a toxic, abusive family or narcissist a choice, you can check their haughtiness and their arrogance by their presumptions to choose. Yes, I'm going to choose the best. I'm going to choose the best. That is haughtiness, without any form of asking questions, without. Look at what Lot did. He didn't stop and ask Abram, well, what do you think? What do you think I should do? I want to make the best decisions for both of us. That would have been a humble thing to do. And if that were the case, I'm willing to bet that Lot would not have been stuck in Sodom and Gomorrah, which the Lord later destroys, which we are going to find out later. But instead, Lot chose for himself, as typical toxic narcissists do. They choose for themselves the next place they're going to go into, their next victim, their next target, their next house, their next relationship. They're choosing for themselves constantly. They take no counsel from anybody. They take no wise words from anybody. And this is what Ambrose of Milan in 397 AD is telling us. Haughtiness is the companion of those who deviate from the truth. Abram was humble in the situation, offering a choice. Lot was rather insolent and presuming to choose. Virtue always humbles itself, whereas wickedness becomes arrogant. And we see Lot becoming arrogant, as we often see toxic people and narcissists, especially, becoming very arrogant in their actions and where they want to go and what they choose for themselves to do without taking any counsel of anybody else, without making sure that it fits what anybody else is, what's fair, what's equal. Toxic people don't do that. They're just choosing for themselves constantly. Ambrose of Milan also continues, Lot chose for himself. Indeed, God has placed before us good and evil. This is important for you and I to understand. God places before each and every one of us good and evil so that we may choose. All right. But let us choose that which is more let us not choose, rather, that which is more pleasing at first sight, because you are oftentimes attracted by false beauty while leaving concealed the truth in nature. This is important for us to understand. Oftentimes when we see that the grass looks greener on the other side, we have no idea what's really going on over there. And this was the case with Abram and Lot. Now, moving on, Genesis 13, verse 12. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, but Lot settled in the cities of the plain and pitched his tent toward Sodom. Abram was probably thinking the whole time that he got the bad end of the deal. Abram was in what seemed to be the desert, the land of Canaan. It's all desert. While Lot was in the beautiful looking garden of the Lord. That's what it looked like. It looked like the garden of the Lord. But little did he know, again, it was Sodom. It was Gomorrah. It was already overtaken and lived in by wickedness because of the beauty of the place. In fact, Genesis 13, verse 13 tells us, but the men of Sodom were wicked, sinning greatly against the Lord. And that's exactly where Lot was headed. Now watch this. After Lot had departed, after the toxicity between the two groups had departed, and again, Abram gave Lot the choice. Abram gave the partner in toxicity, a choice. You go. This is the humble way to do it. This is ultimately how you win. You win narcissism. You win in toxic relationships by giving them the choice, giving them the ability to, giving them what they want. They will, I guarantee you, it's inevitable. They will stumble upon their own issues as a result of their choice, but we must allow them to go. And we must allow them to think that they are making the right choice so that they do go. Does this make sense to you? Typically, narcissists and toxic people do not respond well to you or me telling them what to do. You leave, you did this, that. How many of you are aware of that? It's engaging to them. It draws them into battle. However, if you try this in a toxic relationship, I give you the choice. You go where you want to go, and I'll go the opposite way. I see that we're having a hard time getting along. You choose what you want to do, and I'll do the opposite. I don't want us to fight. It's powerful. And ultimately, it puts you in the position of power to be blessed in your life. Genesis chapter 13, verse 14. After Lot had departed, then, and only then, right? Not only then, but then, once again, the Lord reminded Abram. He said this, he said, now lift up your eyes from the place where you are and look to the north and the south and the east and the west. For all the land that you see, I will give to you and your offspring forever. Now, verse 17, he says, get up and walk around the land through its length and its width, for I will give it to you. This is an important thing. When we eliminate the toxicity from our life, we have a responsibility to not sit and sulk and stare at the toxic person or the toxic people who have departed and has moved on to what seems to be something better. Again, Lot had no idea that he was walking smack into Sodom and Gomorrah right before it was about to be destroyed. Abram did not know that as well. But Abram had a choice. He could have sat and sulked as Lot departed and saying, wow, look at that. Lot's really moving on, and he's getting the best end of the deal. He's going to what looks like this lavish garden of the Lord. Meanwhile, me and my possessions and the people who are with me, we are in this desert place. That's not fair. We are in this broken state. That's not fair. The Lord had to remind Abram through his good deed of giving Lot that choice, saying, look, don't worry about where Lot is going. Don't worry about where the toxicity is moving on to. Don't look. The beauty that you see is a facade. That place that looks great is a facade. It's wicked. You don't know this yet, but it is wicked. Don't worry about that. What I want you to do, this is the Lord speaking to Abram, speaking to you, and speaking to me. What I want you to do is explore the area that I have you in. It may not look like much, but it is your inheritance from me. I'm going to give it all to you. Now you've got to get up. We've got to stop looking at the toxic people and what they have and where they're going. We have to look around us and explore. Genesis 13, verse 17, get up and walk around the land through its length and its width, for I will give it to you. Get up and walk where you are. Move around your space, no matter how little it is. If you've been called to a new city, explore this space away from the toxicity. Explore it on your own, because this is for you. This is your inheritance. And this is, you explore this area and get accustomed to this, you'll stop looking towards the toxic person and the toxicity and what's going on over there. You'll stop thinking of and looking at what seems to be the better option, and you'll focus on where you're at. This is what the Lord was asking Abram to do when he says in verse 17, get up, walk around the land through its length and its width, for I will give it to you. Focus on this. Yes, I know it looks like the toxic people win. It looks like they're moving on. But if you will only focus in your area, this is going to be your future, and it's going to be built upon, and there's going to be huge blessings there. Meanwhile, the wickedness that might be going on where it looks better, you don't even need to be a part of that or see that. Do you follow me? And that's exactly what God was trying to do with Abram, was trying to get him to stop focusing and looking on where Lot went, because he was going into a wicked place. And there was a risk that Abram might at some point follow along in those footsteps, and the Lord did not want that at all. He said, get accustomed to where you are. This is where your promise is going to be. Don't worry about what that looks like over there near Sodom, because little do you know, that is going to be destroyed. That is going to fall apart because it is wicked. I know it looks beautiful, but it is going to collapse. You want nothing to do with that. Let Lot go. But then obviously we'll find out later that God does send Abram to save his nephew Lot. However, at this point in time, what God is doing in the story is building Abram's confidence to do with very little and to not look, to look past what looks the best. How many of you need to hear this message right now? I know I do. We oftentimes want to look for the best and gravitate towards that, when the message here is no. Sometimes you need to let the toxicity move towards the best, what seems to be the best, while we just draw back and get accustomed to what we have, so where there's peace. And we have to not be fooled by what things appear in order to believe that happiness is there. And that's exactly what Lot was aiming for, was happiness immediately. All right. This is a difficult message, but I'm glad that you are here with me, being a part of this message. We're going to continue on next Saturday morning, and I'm glad that you're here. Have a blessed weekend, everybody, and we'll be back with more videos on the Organic Royal Wheat channel all throughout this week. And next Saturday morning, I'll be here 9 o'clock a.m. Central Standard Time for Royal Wheat Fellowship. Have a great Saturday, everyone.